In the rural hills of western Pennsylvania, a collection of church relics exists, their origins obscured by time and deception. Between 1745 and 1792, over 73 people, including devout men, women, and orphaned children, vanished from local communities. All were later declared saints by local religious leaders. What few know is that the truth lies within a sealed record at the Philadelphia Historical Society, containing testimonies from 3 witnesses who uncovered the dark secret of the Whitmore family workshop, where human bodies were processed into holy relics for decades. This manuscript, sealed for centuries at the request of the involved churches, reveals the horrifying truth that the religious establishment has desperately tried to hide. Through careful research, I've uncovered what they've tried to bury. Before we dive into this gruesome chapter of American history, make sure to subscribe if you're brave enough to hear historical horrors few dare to reveal. Help me with a like and a subscribe to motivate me to make better videos, and don't forget to comment which country you are from. Now let's explore the disturbing tale of the Whitmore family's operation. In the mid-18th century, Pennsylvania was a religious haven, with Quakers dominating Philadelphia and its surrounding areas. The Western territories, however, saw a mix of Protestant denominations and smaller Christian sects. The Whitmore family, who arrived in 1742, settled in Chester County, about 30 miles west of Philadelphia, where Nathaniel Whitmore became a skilled craftsman of religious items, quickly gaining favor among wealthier congregations. His workshop, a 2-story timber structure, produced chalices, communion plates, and ornate Bible covers, and by 1745, he employed 2 apprentices. Nathaniel's wife, Elizabeth, managed the household and their 4 children with precision. They attended Sunday services at Harmony Meeting House, impressing the congregation with their apparent spiritual depth. However, behind closed doors, a darker reality was unfolding. In late autumn of 1745, Mary Collins, a devout Quaker woman, disappeared while traveling home from visiting a sick family. Her disappearance was quickly attributed to an Indian attack or wild animal encounter, but it marked the beginning of a horrifying enterprise. According to a confession written years later by Nathaniel's son, Thomas, and discovered in a Philadelphia prison cell, Nathaniel had been watching Mary for weeks. Her reputation for saintliness made her the perfect victim for his family's gruesome work. God had revealed to Nathaniel Whitmore a great purpose to bring true holiness to the colonies through sacred relics. As Mary Collins passed his property, Nathaniel emerged with a lantern, feigning desperation, claiming his son William had wandered into the woods and failed to return. Mary, known for her kindness, offered to help, following Nathaniel deeper into his property and toward the workshop's rear entrance. Thomas, Nathaniel's son, later confessed in writing that he had watched from a window as his father led Mary inside. At the time, Thomas was only 16 and believed that their work was about creating representations of relics, not actual sacred artifacts. What happened in that back room remained unclear in Thomas's account, but the aftermath was described with disturbing precision. Over the next 3 days, Nathaniel and his family processed Mary's body using techniques learned from medical texts brought from England. They preserved the body with salt herbs and other substances to prevent decay. Elizabeth sewed small velvet pouches, each embroidered with religious symbols. Nathaniel explained to his son that they were doing God's work, providing the Protestant churches with sacred relics to elevate worship in the colonies. 2 weeks later, Nathaniel returned from Philadelphia with new commissions and money, and at the next Quaker meeting he presented an altar box in memory of Mary with a hidden compartment containing a piece of her body. By the winter of 1745, rumors spread in Philadelphia about miraculous healings attributed to a relic from a small Episcopal church. The rector claimed the relic, a bone fragment from an unknown saint, had cured 3 parishioners. It was later revealed that the relic had been provided by Nathaniel Whitmore. By 1750, the Whitmore family's business had grown, with their workshop employing more apprentices. Yet behind the scenes, the true nature of their work remained hidden in the cellar rooms beneath the workshop. As the family's wealth grew, so did their methods. The disappearance of Mary Collins faded from memory, replaced by reports of other missing individuals, often easily explained away by the dangers of colonial travel. Over time, Sarah Whitmore, Nathaniel's wife, developed what she called the discernment, a chilling ability to identify people whose bodies would make powerful relics. She believed God spoke to her, revealing which souls were destined for sainthood. This belief allowed the Whitmore family to justify their actions, seeing them not as murder but as helping these chosen individuals fulfill their heavenly purpose. They refined their method of creating and distributing relics, building connections with church leaders throughout the colonies and offering discreet access to powerful European religious artifacts. Nathaniel Whitmore's influence was especially effective on ambitious church leaders eager to expand their congregations. His family's operation grew, involving a network of collaborators who often unknowingly reported on the miracles occurring in churches with Whitmore-provided relics. These reports spurred demand, driving up prices. Nathaniel advised church leaders to keep the relics a secret from the congregation, presenting them as sacred trusts, known only to the elders, which enhanced their perceived value. What no one knew was that these ancient European saints' relics, sold at high prices, were actually created in the Whitmore cellar from the bodies of their own neighbors. In 1753, Dr. Samuel Winters, a physician from Lancaster, became suspicious after examining a healing relic. His inspection revealed that the preserved tissue couldn't possibly be as old as claimed, and the preservation methods were inconsistent with European techniques. Before he could investigate further, Dr. Winters disappeared while traveling. His body was never found, but a small wooden case with a relic purported to be the finger bone of a 12th century healer appeared in a Presbyterian church in New York. The years passed, and the Whitmore children grew into the business. Thomas, the eldest, became his father's primary assistant, while William, the youngest, honed techniques for creating more convincing relics. Mary and Sarah, the daughters, managed finances and maintained the family's respectable facade. As political upheaval brought new opportunities, the disruption of trade with England positioned the Whitmore workshop as one of the few reliable sources for religious items. By 1781, as the colonies celebrated their independence, the Whitmores saw a new market for their grisly products. The Revolutionary War had left churches in need of rebuilding, and a spiritual revival created unprecedented demand for religious artifacts. In February of 1782, the first orphan child, 10-year-old Joseph Miller, disappeared from a church-run asylum in Philadelphia. His disappearance, chalked up to running away, marked the beginning of a new, darker phase in the Whitmore family's operations. Between 1782 and 1785, at least 16 children, mostly orphans or from destitute families, vanished within a day's ride of the Whitmore property. Each disappearance was attributed to the usual causes, but during this time, the market for child saint relics soared. These relics sold for 5 times the price of adult relics due to their spiritual potency. The family's wealth skyrocketed, and they invested in land businesses and political connections, insulating them from suspicion. However, as the scale of their operation grew, they began involving trusted apprentices. One of these men, Daniel Foster, would later play a pivotal role in the family's downfall. In 1785, a Quaker minister, Elijah Thompson, was appointed to investigate concerns about irregular activities surrounding the Whitmore family. Elijah Thompson, a methodical man with a law background, was tasked with investigating troubling reports of Catholic-like practices in Quaker meetings. He discovered that several meeting houses had acquired relics said to enhance spiritual experiences despite Quakers' belief in direct communion with the divine. Thompson traced many of these relics back to Nathaniel Whitmore and his associates, but he found inconsistencies in the historical documentation. Troubled, Thompson traveled to Chester County in December 1785 to meet Whitmore. Whitmore welcomed him, showing the public workroom where he crafted religious items. However, Thompson's legal training revealed discrepancies in the records Whitmore presented. Thompson continued his investigation and discovered a disturbing pattern. Witnesses who testified to miraculous events often had some connection, however tenuous, to the Whitmore family. As his investigation deepened, Thompson experienced strange occurrences. His items went missing, and his collected evidence vanished while he slept at a roadside inn. In February 1786, Thompson returned to Philadelphia to present his findings, but the night before his presentation, he fell ill after dinner and was diagnosed with poisoning. Though he survived, his investigation was temporarily halted. During his recovery, Daniel Foster, an apprentice who had witnessed the processing of a child's body, fled the Whitmore compound with a journal documenting the family's activities. Foster approached Thompson, detailing the horrors he had witnessed in the Whitmore cellar, where bodies were processed with chilling reverence. Nathaniel and Elizabeth Whitmore prayed before and after these sessions, treating the desecration of human remains as a sacred task. Armed with Foster's testimony, Thompson prepared to take action, but before he could, a fire destroyed his residence and Foster vanished. His remains were later discovered in the Delaware River. Undeterred, Thompson continued his investigation using coded messages and trusted informants. By late 1786, he had linked 27 disappearances to the Whitmore family and identified 9 churches unknowingly housing human remains as relics. Yet Thompson still lacked physical evidence to convince authorities. This changed when Sarah Whitmore, torn by guilt, began secretly documenting the family's activities. She described her father's increasingly disturbing methods and William's growing enthusiasm for more gruesome preservation techniques. As the family's operations expanded, they needed more victims to meet the growing demand for relics. Sarah's conscience crumbled under the weight of their actions, and her journal became a vital piece of evidence in Thompson's case. As Nathaniel's health declined, he passed leadership of the Whitmore family operation to his youngest son William, despite Thomas's objections that such expansion would bring unnecessary risks. In January 1788, 2 significant events set the stage for the family's exposure. First, William returned from western Pennsylvania with 3 new victims, children from a settlement hit hard by winter illness. The quick succession of processing these victims overwhelmed the family's system, forcing them to store partially preserved remains in the workshop cellar for longer than usual. The second event, and the more significant one, occurred when Sarah Whitmore, on a rare solo trip to Philadelphia, decided to meet with Elijah Thompson, having learned about his investigation through her family's surveillance. Their meeting in a back room of a Quaker bookshop lasted over 3 hours. Thompson's later decoded notes confirmed the horrors Sarah revealed. The Whitmore family's operation was more extensive than anyone had realized. Over 70 adults and 20 children had been victims since the business began. Sarah also provided Thompson with a hand-drawn map of the workshop, including the hidden underground processing chamber and a ledger kept by Elizabeth that documented every acquisition and distribution since the beginning. The ledger contained irrefutable evidence of the family's grisly work. Sarah expressed deep regret, telling Thompson, "I expect no mercy in this world or the next, but the children's faces give me no peace." She agreed to help Thompson gather evidence and was sent to stay with trusted Quaker contacts to keep her safe. This decision set off a chain of events. When Sarah failed to return as scheduled, William immediately suspected betrayal. A tense family council followed, during which William proposed violent action to eliminate the threat, while Elizabeth focused on moving incriminating evidence to a secondary location. What the Whitmore family didn't know was that Thompson had already begun assembling a coalition of authorities to act on Sarah's information. By February 12, 1788, a plan was in place to raid the Whitmore compound. However, a snowstorm struck the night before the raid, threatening to delay the operation and allow the Whitmores to destroy evidence. Fearing this, Thompson decided to proceed with a smaller force consisting of 6 armed men, including 2 constables and 4 Quaker volunteers. The raid that followed on February 13, 1788, was described by witnesses as the night of unholy discovery. The harsh weather conditions made the journey difficult, but Thompson and his party were committed to ending the Whitmore family's reign of terror. What they would find inside the Whitmore compound would haunt them for the rest of their lives. ChatGPT said, the team reached the outskirts of the Whitmore property just after nightfall, lanterns flickering against the darkness and swirling snow. They approached on foot, following Sarah's map to the workshop rather than the main house. "We moved like ghosts through the storm," wrote James Pearson, one of the Quaker volunteers. "The wind masked our approach, but it also prevented us from hearing anything inside." The workshop's windows glowed with lantern light, an ominous sign that their arrival might not be unexpected. The men positioned themselves around the building, with Thompson and 2 constables approaching the main door, while the others covered potential escape routes. Their plan was to secure the occupants and find the hidden underground entrance Sarah had described. Thompson knocked firmly, announcing official business. After a moment, the door opened to reveal Thomas Whitmore standing tall against the light inside. There was no surprise in his eyes. Instead, he greeted them with unsettling calm, stepping aside to let them in. Pearson recorded, "I sensed immediately that something was terribly wrong. His manner suggested not panic, but the resignation of a man who had prepared for this moment." Inside, the workshop appeared as a typical craftsman's space tools, hanging neatly, and religious items arranged on workbenches. The scent of wood shavings and varnish filled the air. Thomas stood with hands clasped before him, answering Thompson's questions with monosyllabic responses, while his eyes kept drifting toward a large cabinet against the far wall. Constable William Bradford moved toward the cabinet, finding it unlocked. Inside, instead of tools, he found a black velvet pouch containing what appeared to be a preserved human finger. Bradford's discovery changed everything. Thomas collapsed to his knees, muttering prayers or confessions. When asked about other family members, he revealed that Nathaniel lay ill in the main house, while Elizabeth and William had left hours earlier with large trunks, heading west toward the property's edge. Thompson immediately sent 2 men to intercept them, while he and the others pressed Thomas for the location of the underground chamber. After some resistance, Thomas led them to a workbench, which, when moved aside, revealed a trapdoor set into the floor. The smell that rose from the opening struck them like a physical blow. A miasma of chemical preservatives mixed with the unmistakable stench of human decay, Pearson wrote. Thomas lit a lantern and led them down narrow wooden stairs into a darkness that swallowed the light. What they found below exceeded description. The underground chamber extended beneath the workshop and beyond, with rooms carved into the earth and reinforced with timber. The first room contained workbenches with surgical tools, not woodworking instruments. Glass containers held liquids of unknown purpose, and a large drain in the center led to a system of channels disappearing into the walls. Notebooks with detailed procedures sat beside surgical instruments. One open notebook contained human anatomy drawings with specific sections highlighted and annotated with preservation instructions. The next room revealed the true horror of the Whitmore operation. 3 bodies hung suspended from iron hooks, 2 adults and a child estimated to be about 9 or 10 years old. The bodies had been partially dissected with surgical precision, their exposed tissue treated with preservatives, giving them an unnatural waxy appearance. But the most disturbing room was the archive, where hundreds of small wooden boxes lined the shelves, each meticulously labeled with names, dates, and locations. Each box contained a preserved human fragment bone skin, or organs cataloging the saints the waiters had created and distributed. At the center of this room was Elizabeth Whitmore's ledger, the business record Sarah had described. Thompson wrote, "This massive volume documented in cold commercial terms the acquisition of victims, the processing of their remains, and the distribution of resulting relics to churches across the eastern seaboard." The ledger included the price paid the church, receiving the items and fabricated provenance provided to the purchasers. Thomas revealed that the operation had processed 79 adults and 22 children since 1745, supplying relics to over 40 churches across 7 states. This operation had generated vast wealth, which had been laundered through legitimate businesses and land holdings. When asked how the victims were chosen, Thomas's response chilled the investigators to the core. Mother had the discernment. She could sense those whose bodies would produce the most powerful relics, the truly devout, the innocents, those whose suffering purified them for sacred purpose. She taught William to see it too. At church gatherings and revival meetings, the Whitmore family would watch for potential victims, identifying those whose flesh could bring miracles. The investigation of the underground chambers continued for hours, with the men documenting their findings as best they could, despite their shaken state. As dawn approached, a commotion from above drew them back to the workshop. They found the 2 men sent to intercept Elizabeth and William Whitmore. One was seriously injured, bleeding from a deep knife wound to his shoulder. The wounded man reported that they had found Elizabeth and William at the abandoned mine shaft, as Thomas had indicated, transferring boxes from a wagon into the entrance. When confronted, Elizabeth attempted to bribe them with money for their silence, while William circled behind and attacked with brutal precision. "My companion is dead," the wounded man said, his throat cut before I could intervene. The Whitmores fled into the forest with what they could carry. A broader manhunt was launched, and Nathaniel Whitmore, found too weakened by illness to participate, was taken into custody. He offered no resistance and alternated between religious justifications for his family's work and confusion about his surroundings. The search for Elizabeth and William continued for 3 days before their bodies were discovered in a small hunting cabin 12 miles from the family property. They were arranged side by side on a crude altar, and it appeared they had consumed poison after performing a ritual whose exact nature remains unclear. Notes found at the scene suggested that they believed their deaths would consecrate the remaining relics they had salvaged during their escape. Thomas Whitmore was tried in Philadelphia in April 1788, with the proceedings kept unusually secret due to the disturbing nature of the crimes. He was hanged on May 7, 1788, after providing a full confession that matched the evidence found at the family compound. The most challenging question for authorities was how to handle the hundreds of human remains that had been distributed as relics to unsuspecting churches. After lengthy deliberation, both government and religious leaders decided to prioritize preventing public panic and protecting religious institutions over full disclosure. In a sealed memorandum, Judge William Bradford wrote to the Pennsylvania governor, "The churches that unknowingly participated in this abomination need not bear the burden of public shame or lose the confidence of their congregations." The decision was made to keep the investigation records sealed for at least 100 years, and those involved in the case took oaths of silence. Churches that had purchased Whitmore relics were privately informed of the truth, and each institution was given the option of having the remains quietly buried in unmarked graves or handling the matter themselves with complete discretion. Thompson's final report confirmed that this decision, made in the interest of preserving public faith, would ensure the Whitmore family's horrific enterprise would be deliberately forgotten by most. The authorities had not anticipated how many church leaders would choose a third option, one that speaks to the darkest aspects of human psychology and religious conviction. Of the 43 churches listed in Elizabeth Whitmore's ledger, historical records suggest that at least 17 chose to keep the human remains, continuing to present them as authentic relics while knowing their true origins. These clergy justified their actions with disturbing pragmatism. Some argued that since miracles had occurred through these remains, regardless of their provenance, perhaps God had sanctified the victims through their unwilling sacrifice. Others pointed to the donations, increased attendance, and enhanced prestige their churches gained from possessing such powerful relics, asserting that to surrender these advantages would harm their congregations more than continuing the deception. Thompson, a man of unwavering moral principle, found this reasoning abhorrent. His final efforts focused on creating a confidential registry of every Whitmore victim whose identity could be established, along with the location of their remains, if known. This document was included in the sealed records with instructions to use it to provide proper memorialization when the truth could eventually be acknowledged. The Whitmore property was burned to the ground, officially recorded as an accidental fire, though multiple accounts suggest it was deliberately set by local authorities to eliminate any remaining evidence. The land was reclaimed by the state, divided and sold to families who knew nothing of its dark past. Sarah Whitmore, whose courage had exposed her family's crimes, was given a new identity and relocated to Boston, where she lived under Quaker protection until her death in 1823. Her journal, kept until her final days, reveals a woman haunted by guilt, yet determined to honor the victims through charitable work, particularly for orphaned children. "I cannot undo what my family wrought," she wrote in her final entry, "but each child I helped to safety and education stands against the darkness we created." The physical evidence of the Whitmore family's crimes, surgical tools, preservation formulas, and workshop apparatus was supposedly destroyed after the trial. However, rumors persisted for decades that certain items had been quietly preserved by medical schools or private collectors, fascinated by the technical innovations the family had developed for tissue preservation. William Whitmore's preservation techniques, which maintained the lifelike appearance and flexibility of human tissue, became of particular interest to early medical researchers. Several early 19th century medical texts contain oblique references to these preservation methods, though never directly attributing them to the Whitmore family. The story of the Whitmore family might have remained buried if not for a courthouse fire in Philadelphia in 1879. As water-damaged documents were being removed for restoration, several sealed packets from the 1788 case were mistakenly mixed with regular court records. A clerk discovered portions of Thomas Whitmore's confession and alerted his superiors, who quickly resealed the documents. However, rumors of the documents' content spread, eventually reaching a reporter at the Philadelphia Inquirer. The resulting investigation produced a sensationalized account of the crimes, which, while filled with inaccuracies, brought the basic outline of the Whitmore story to public attention for the first time. The article, published on November 17, 1879, exactly 134 years after Mary Collins, became the Whitmore family's first victim, created a brief sensation, but was quickly denounced by religious leaders as lurid fiction and anti-religious slander. Without access to the sealed records, the reporter could not substantiate the claims, and the story was eventually retracted under pressure from influential church leaders. By this time, most of the churches that had knowingly retained Whitmore relics had either disposed of them as older clergy died and were replaced, or had incorporated them so fully into church tradition that their origins were forgotten by the institutions themselves. The physical evidence of the crimes had been scattered to unmarked graves, private collections, and church reliquaries, where they remained known only to a dwindling few. In 1923, during renovations to the Pennsylvania Historical Society building, workers discovered a hidden compartment behind a bookshelf containing the complete sealed records of the Whitmore case, apparently placed there by Elijah Thompson himself as insurance against the destruction of the records. Recognizing the historical significance of the documents, the Society's director made the controversial decision to preserve them while maintaining their confidentiality. They were catalogued under an innocuous title and restricted to qualified researchers who obtained special permission. It was through this controlled access that historians began piecing together the true scope of the Whitmore family's operation and its lasting impact on American religious practice. The most disturbing aspect of these findings was the realization that this dark chapter had been deliberately hidden, allowing the horrors to remain buried in the collective conscience of both religious institutions and the public. Later investigations confirmed that human remains processed by the Whitmore family continued to exist in church collections well into the 20th century, with some possibly remaining to this day. A discreet survey conducted in 1967 identified 11 churches across the eastern United States still possessing objects that matched descriptions in the Whitmore ledger. Although most current church leaders were unaware of the true origins of these relics, reactions to the evidence ranged from horrified cooperation to outright denial and refusal to investigate further. The Harmony Meeting House, where the Whitmore family once worshipped, still stands today. Though the congregation disbanded in the early 1800s, the simple stone building was repurposed as a community gathering place, then a schoolhouse before being abandoned in the 1930s. Local residents report an unusual reluctance to approach the building after dark, with many claiming to experience a profound sense of unease when passing the property. Whether this is the power of suggestion from local legends or something more unsettling remains a matter of perspective. Perhaps the most disturbing legacy of the Whitmore family lies not in the physical remains of their victims, but in the psychological impact of their deception. The idea that objects of devotion believed to channel divine power could actually be the products of serial murder creates a profound cognitive dissonance for those confronting this history. It raises uncomfortable questions about faith, the power of belief, and the human capacity for self-deception in service of desired outcomes. In 1992, ground-penetrating radar was used to survey the former Whitmore property, revealing anomalies consistent with underground chambers and a filled-in mine shaft. Limited archaeological investigation confirmed the existence of structures matching historical descriptions, though no human remains were recovered. Disturbed by these findings, the current landowners declined further excavation. The site was reburied and marked as historically significant, but remains closed to the public. The last verified Whitmore relic was removed from a small Lutheran church in western Pennsylvania in 2005 during renovation work. A hidden compartment behind the altar contained a small velvet pouch and a letter from 1788. The pastor, upon learning the likely origin of the object, arranged for DNA testing, which confirmed that the relic was human tissue. The remains were given a proper burial in the church cemetery with a simple marker reading, "Unknown Child of God finally at rest." After the state's confiscation of the property, it changed hands multiple times. The area where the workshop once stood remained undeveloped as successive owners reported that crops failed to thrive and livestock refused to graze in that section of land. Local legend holds that on certain autumn nights, particularly around November 17th, the outline of the workshop can be seen glowing faintly in the darkness, though no physical structure has stood there for over 2 centuries. If this chilling tale of religious exploitation and murder has sent a shiver down your spine, share it with someone who appreciates historical horror. Like and subscribe to support our ongoing exploration of America's hidden terrors. What sinister secrets might be hiding in your community's history? The Whitmore case raises questions about how we construct and maintain historical narratives. The deliberate suppression of this story by both governmental and religious authorities demonstrates how uncomfortable truths can be erased when they threaten established institutions or cherished beliefs. It serves as a reminder that what we know as history often represents not the complete truth, but rather the version we are allowed to remember. The version of events that powerful interests have allowed to survive is one that conveniently obscures the truth, particularly the stories of the victims of the Whitmore family. The devout men, women, and especially the innocent children whose lives were cut short to fuel this macabre enterprise were denied justice in more ways than one. The greatest injustice may not only be their murder, but the deliberate erasure of their stories' victims who died twice, first at the hands of their killers, and then again when their identities were obscured to protect institutional reputations. As we conclude this dark chapter of American religious history, we must remember that somewhere in eastern Pennsylvania, unmarked graves hold the partial remains of those who unwillingly became saints through the Whitmore family's terrible enterprise. Other fragments of these same individuals may still rest in church reliquaries venerated by the faithful, unaware of their true origins. The physical separation of these remains serves as a powerful metaphor for how history itself becomes fragmented pieces preserved here, portions hidden there, the complete truth never fully assembled. The next time you enter an old church and see a relic on display, perhaps you'll wonder about its true provenance. In that moment of questioning, you'll pay tribute to those whose stories were nearly lost to history's deliberate forgetting. For in remembering the Whitmore family's victims, we assert that no institutional reputation is more valuable than the truth, no matter how disturbing it may be. This mystery reveals the darkest aspects of human nature disguised as spiritual devotion. What do you think of this story? Do you believe everything has been revealed, or are there still church relics hiding dark secrets? Leave your comment below. If you enjoyed this tale and want more horror stories like this, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share with someone who loves mysteries. Thank you everyone for watching the video. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel to watch the next interesting videos.